I'm Miranda Hayes. I'm 27 years old, and the day my father pointed at me in a packed courtroom and declared, "She doesn't deserve a single cent of what she inherited," something inside me finally stopped breaking. It wasn't just what he said, it was the way the judge, his longtime acquaintance, gave a slow, approving nod, as if my fate had already been decided over cocktails months ago. My father's attorney wore the confident smile of a man who believed the verdict was just a formality. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect you, you already understand the kind of silence that filled that room. But this story didn't begin in court. It began 27 years earlier, on the day I was born. That was the same day my mother died. My father, Congressman Richard Hayes, never forgave me for that. At least, that's what it felt like. I grew up knowing, without anyone ever directly saying it, that I represented the worst day of his life. Instead of seeing a daughter, he saw loss. Instead of holding me, he handed me off. My grandparents, William and Patricia Hayes, took me home from the hospital. They became my world. While my father returned to Washington to continue building his political image, my grandparents built something far more important: a family. Our home was warm in a way politics never could be. Grandpa William read me stories every night in his deep, steady voice. Grandma Patricia filled the house with watercolor paintings and the scent of lavender. They celebrated every birthday like it was a national holiday. They tried, oh, how they tried, to believe their son would one day step into his role as a father. He never did. Christmas mornings were magical, until I caught Grandma glancing at her silent phone. Grandpa would quickly distract me with another gift, but I could see it, the quiet disappointment they tried to hide. When I was 5, I asked why my dad never visited. "He's very busy helping people," Grandma said gently. Even at 5, I understood that busy didn't mean unable, it meant unwilling. By middle school, I stopped asking. At school events, Grandpa filled out every parent form. Grandma sat front row at every recital. Even when I destroyed a chop in piece with enthusiasm and zero talent, they were there for everything. Meanwhile, my father was on television giving speeches about family values. The irony would have been funny if it didn't sting so much. When I turned 16, something shifted. Watching him speak on national television about children's futures while ignoring his own became too much. "That's not grief," I told Grandpa one night. "That's a choice." He didn't argue. By the time I graduated college with honors, I had accepted something painful but freeing. I did not need my father's approval to have value. My grandparents taught me something far more powerful than validation. They taught me worth. What I didn't know back then was that the same man who couldn't be bothered to attend my graduation would one day fight me in court over money he never earned. And that courtroom battle, it would expose far more than just greed. But before we get to that, you need to understand what happened when the strongest woman I knew started forgetting my name. If you've ever watched someone you love slowly disappear while they're still alive, you know there's a special kind of heartbreak that doesn't scream, it whispers. After I graduated from college, I moved back home temporarily. I told myself it was just until I found the right job. The truth, I missed my grandparents. The house still felt like the only place in the world where I was completely known. At first, the changes were subtle. Grandma Patricia started sleeping later than usual. This was the woman who had woken up at 6:00 a.m. every day for as long as I could remember. She repeated stories at dinner, forgot small errands. Once, she left the kettle boiling until smoke filled the kitchen. We laughed it off in the beginning. "Too much gardening," she'd say with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. But I noticed the fear behind it. By Christmas that year, we couldn't pretend anymore. She forgot what day it was. She'd begin cooking and wander off mid-recipe. One afternoon I found her standing in the hallway holding an old photo album, staring at it like it belonged to someone else. "I'm scared," she whispered to me, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Something's wrong." The diagnosis came on a gray January morning. Early onset Alzheimer's. There's no gentle way to hear that the person who held your entire world together is going to slowly fade away. Grandpa William didn't cry in the doctor's office. He just nodded, asked practical questions, took notes. But when we got back to the car, his hands shook so badly he couldn't start the engine. 2 to 5 years, the doctor said. Maybe less. I quit my new job the next day. "You can't put your life on hold for me," Grandma protested during one of her clearer moments. "My life is here," I told her. And I meant it. For 2 years, I became her full-time caregiver. Some days were good. We'd look through old photos and she'd remember everything. Other days, she looked at me like I was a stranger. The hardest moments weren't when she forgot events. It was when she forgot me. Meanwhile, Grandpa tried desperately to get his son to visit. "She asks about you," he would say on the phone. "Please, just once." There was always an excuse: votes in Congress, important meetings, travel. My father never came. Grandma's final coherent words were about him. "Has Richard called?" she asked one evening, her voice barely there. He hadn't. She passed away on a rainy Thursday morning, holding my hand while Grandpa told her how much he loved her. My father did not attend her funeral. He called 3 days later. Not to offer condolences, not to ask how his father was coping. He wanted to discuss the lake house. I will never forget the sound of Grandpa's voice breaking, not from grief, but from anger. "She's not even buried yet," he said into the phone. "And you're asking about property." That was the moment something changed in my grandfather. Hope died that day, not just for his wife, but for his son. After the funeral, the house felt hollow. Grandpa wandered from room to room, like he was searching for something that had already left. We leaned on each other. I moved into the guest room near his. We took evening walks around the property. We attended grief counseling quietly, separately, without admitting how much we were both drowning. But here's what I didn't realize at the time. While I was learning how to hold a family together, Grandpa was quietly preparing to protect me from the one person who had never truly been family at all. And when he finally made his move, it would shake everything. Grief changes people. Some grow softer, some grow quieter, and some, like my grandfather, grow sharper. In the 3 years after Grandma passed, Grandpa William never fully recovered, but he didn't fall apart either. Instead, he became deliberate, thoughtful, observant in a way that felt almost strategic. At the time, I thought he was simply putting his affairs in order. He was in his late 70s. That's normal, right? But looking back, I realize he wasn't just preparing for death. He was preparing for war. There were more meetings with his estate attorney, Mr. Peterson. Long private conversations behind closed doors. Documents he reviewed alone instead of asking for my help like he used to. When I asked, he'd smile. "Just updating paperwork, sweetheart." I didn't push. I didn't want to imagine a future without him. His health declined slowly, not dramatically, no sudden illness, just fatigue, long pauses during walks, smaller portions at dinner. Sometimes I'd find him sitting in Grandma's old chair before sunrise, staring at nothing. "The heart gets tired," Dr. Morrison explained gently, especially after losing a partner. But mentally, he was sharp. He still reviewed financial reports every morning, still corrected advisors when they misquoted numbers, still taught me lessons about business and loyalty. One night in his study, he said something that stayed with me. "Loyalty must be earned, Miranda. It is not inherited by blood." I didn't understand then how literal that statement would become. The end came quietly. I found him one Tuesday morning in his leather chair, reading glasses still on, financial section folded neatly in his lap. It looked like he had simply fallen asleep. He hadn't. Mr. Peterson arrived within the hour after I called him. "There are things you need to know," he said carefully. "Your grandfather anticipated complications." Complications. That word echoed in my mind all week as I arranged the funeral. My father didn't attend this one either. No flowers. No statement. No acknowledgement. 3 days after losing the last parent he had left, Congressman Richard Hayes remained silent. The will reading was scheduled for Friday. Mr. Peterson's office felt cold despite the polished wood and leather chairs. I arrived early. My father did not. He arrived 10 minutes late, wearing a tailored suit and the same practiced smile he used on campaign posters. "Miranda," he said smoothly, "sorry for your loss." "My loss, not ours." His attorney followed behind him, sharp eyes, sharper suit. When we sat down, Mr. Peterson began reading. The first portions were straightforward charitable donations, employee bonuses, education funds for staff children. Exactly what I expected from a man who believed wealth was responsibility. Then came my father's section. "To my son, Richard Hayes." Mr. Peterson read, "I leave my disappointment in the man he chose to become, and my hope that he one day understands what he sacrificed." Silence swallowed the room. My father's jaw tightened. Then Mr. Peterson continued, "To my granddaughter, Miranda Hayes, who has demonstrated loyalty, integrity, and love beyond measure, I leave the entirety of my estate, everything, properties, investments, business holdings, liquid assets, all of it." The air shifted. My father's lawyer was on his feet before the sentence finished. "This will is clearly the result of undue influence," he snapped. "We will challenge it immediately." Mr. Peterson didn't flinch. "Your father anticipated that," he replied calmly. "He produced medical evaluations proving Grandpa's mental competence, psychological assessments, video recordings of discussions about estate planning. Then he handed me a sealed letter in Grandpa's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Miranda, if you're reading this, Richard has learned that actions have consequences. You earned this through love, not entitlement. What happens next will reveal who he truly is. Stand firm." I looked up. My father wasn't grieving. He wasn't shocked. He was furious, not heartbroken, outplayed. Within 48 hours, the legal attacks began. Motions questioning Grandpa's mental state, accusations that I manipulated him, subpoenas for my medical and financial records, reporters calling with loaded questions about family disputes. The media narrative formed quickly. Ambitious granddaughter isolates elderly widower, secures massive inheritance. It was political warfare. And my father was very, very good at politics. But he made one mistake. He assumed I was still the little girl who wanted his approval. He forgot who raised me. As court dates approached, I realized something chilling. This wouldn't just be a legal battle. It would be a public execution of my character. And if my father had his way, I would lose everything my grandparents built. What I didn't know yet was that he had one final card to play. And it involved the judge assigned to our case. 3 weeks before our hearing, I saw the photograph that made everything click. It was printed in the local paper, a glossy image from a political fundraiser. My father stood laughing beside several familiar faces, including Judge Martin Crawford, the same Judge Crawford who had just been assigned to preside over our inheritance case. The caption read, "Longtime friends reconnect at annual civic dinner." Friends, not colleagues, not acquaintances, friends. My stomach dropped. I'd seen photos of them together before over the years, campaign events, charity galas, election night celebrations. I'd never paid attention. It was just political networking. But now that man would decide whether I kept my grandfather's legacy. I called Mr. Peterson immediately. "This is highly concerning," he admitted. "A judge with a personal relationship to one of the parties should consider recusal." "Should?" I repeated. "But will he?" There was a long pause. Not unless he's forced to. That's when I started digging. I went through archives, campaign websites, social media posts, charity newsletters. And what I found wasn't a casual professional overlap. It was 15 years of documented friendship. Photos of them golfing. Campaign fundraisers where the judge had donated. Private dinners where their wives appeared together. Public endorsements. Arm around shoulder, wide smiles. This wasn't impartial distance. This was loyalty. I printed everything, organized it chronologically. If they wanted to play strategy, I could play strategy too. The morning of the hearing, the courthouse was packed. Reporters lined the hallways. Whispers followed me into the courtroom. My father looked confident, relaxed, like a man who already knew the outcome. Judge Crawford entered with measured authority, adjusting his robe, scanning the room. His expression gave nothing away, but when my father's lawyer began presenting their case, I saw it. The subtle nods, the sympathetic tone, the extra time granted for argument. They painted my grandfather as confused, manipulated, elderly and vulnerable. They implied I isolated him, controlled him, influenced him. The judge listened intently. When it was our turn, Mr. Peterson presented medical records proving mental competence, testimony from business partners, evidence of deliberate estate planning. The judge checked his watch. He interrupted more often. His interest had cooled. I could feel it. The decision had already been made, so I stood up. Your Honor, I said evenly, holding the manila folder in my hands. Before a ruling is issued, I have something the court needs to review. The courtroom shifted. Judge Crawford frowned. Miss Hayes, your attorney has presented your case. Yes, I replied calmly. But this concerns the court's impartiality. That word landed hard. Impartiality. I removed the first photograph, the recent fundraiser clipping. This shows you and my father at a social gathering. He stiffened. Professional acquaintance is not grounds for recusal. He replied sharply. Agreed, I said. But 15 years of documented personal friendship may be. I laid out photograph after photograph across the table. Campaign events, private dinners, charity galas, golf outings, public endorsements. Each image told the same story. Not distance, closeness. The room fell silent except for camera shutters. My father's confident smile began to fracture. Miss Hayes, these insinuations are inappropriate, the judge warned. They are documented. I answered steadily. Public records, photograph donations, appearances. You and my father share a long-standing personal relationship. That creates, at minimum, the appearance of bias. He swallowed. I am capable of ruling objectively, and that's when my father lost control. He shot to his feet, face red, finger pointed directly at me. This girl only knows how to waste what she doesn't deserve. The words echoed, and in that split second, Judge Crawford did something fatal. He nodded. Just slightly, but unmistakably. The courtroom gasped. The bias wasn't subtle anymore. It was visible, palpable, real. I looked directly at the judge. Your Honor, if you proceed to rule in my father's favor, despite this documented relationship, I will be submitting a formal complaint with all supporting evidence to the Judicial Review Board. The room went dead quiet. You cannot be both his friend and my judge, I continued. The law doesn't allow it. The judge's face drained of color. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then he cleared his throat, voice trembling. The medical documentation confirms the testator was of sound mind. The will is valid. The estate shall be distributed according to its explicit terms. He struck the gavel. Case dismissed. He left the bench almost immediately. Reporters exploded into motion. My father stood frozen. For the first time in 27 years, he looked at me not as a burden, but as an opponent. You've ruined everything, he muttered. No, I replied quietly. You did that yourself. He walked out without another word. But the story didn't end there. Because what happened after that courtroom ruling was far bigger than inheritance. 6 months after the courtroom showdown, I stood in the garden behind the house I had grown up in, the house that was now legally, undeniably mine. The roses Grandma Patricia planted decades ago were in full bloom. The sunset painted the sky in soft gold and lavender, the same colors she used in her watercolors. For the first time in years, everything felt quiet, not empty, peaceful. The fallout from that day in court had been swift. Within a week, Judge Crawford announced his resignation, citing personal health reasons. The timing fooled no one. A formal inquiry followed shortly after, prompted by a complaint filed with the State Judicial Oversight Committee, not by me, but by a journalist who had been in that courtroom and recognized exactly what that nod meant. As for my father, the media turned on him with the same speed they once praised him. Questions surfaced about his connections, his influence, and whether other legal matters had benefited from similar friendships. An ethics investigation opened quietly, then very publicly. 3 months later, Congressman Richard Hayes resigned, stating he wished to focus on personal matters and family. The irony was almost poetic, but here's the truth. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel revenge. I felt clarity. Because the real inheritance my grandfather left me was never about money. It was about responsibility. I took control of his companies, but I didn't run them the same way. I implemented employee profit sharing programs, expanded community investments, established a foundation in my grandmother's name to support Alzheimer's research and caregiver assistance. If wealth was a tool, as Grandpa always said, then I would use it with intention. And then something unexpected happened. I met David. We met at a sustainable business conference where I was speaking about ethical leadership and corporate responsibility. He was an environmental engineer, thoughtful, steady, refreshingly unimpressed by status or money. On our third date, over coffee, he said something that settled deep inside me. "I don't care what you inherited," he said. "I care what you're building." No one had ever said that to me before. We married in the same church where I gave both of my grandparents eulogies. It felt like closing a painful chapter and beginning a new one in the same sacred space. My father didn't attend. He didn't call. Some absences stop hurting once you accept they're permanent. 2 years after the trial, our daughter was born. We named her Patricia Rose. A year and a half later, our son arrived. William David. They will grow up in this house surrounded by stories, not of courtrooms and betrayal, but of love, resilience, and values that don't bend under pressure. They will never question whether they are wanted. They will never wonder if they are a burden. They will know that family is proven through presence, not DNA. Sometimes I walk into Grandpa's old study, now my office, and sit in his leather chair. I think about the letter he left me. What happens next will reveal who he truly is. He was right. The courtroom didn't just expose my father. It revealed me. It showed me that I am not the abandoned child waiting for acknowledgement. I am the granddaughter of 2 extraordinary people who taught me integrity, strength, and how to stand firm when power tries to intimidate. My father spent his life chasing status. I chose to build legacy. And legacy isn't measured in headlines or titles. It's measured in the people who feel safe because of you. So yes, I inherited property. Yes, I won the case. But the greatest inheritance was the unshakable certainty that I was always worthy, and that is something no courtroom, no politician, and no bitter father could ever take from me. If this journey taught you anything, let it be this. Sometimes the battle isn't about money. It's about proving that love, loyalty, and truth still matter. And sometimes, the people who underestimate you the most become the ones who teach you exactly how strong you really are.